The scent of cinnamon and bourbon clung to my coat as I stepped into Celeste's foyer, balancing two pies wrapped carefully in foil. My heels clicked against the polished hardwood, a sound lost beneath the clatter of silverware and overlapping voices drifting in from the dining room. The house was immaculate as always. Celeste had a talent for staging warmth. Pumpkin-scented candles flickered beside symmetrical place settings. I followed the sounds, smiling politely as I passed by framed photos, none of which included me. Inside the dining room, everyone was already seated. My son Wesley barely looked up from his phone, his brow furrowed in whatever world existed beyond this one. The twins were tapping their knives against the china. Celeste stood at the head of the table, her pearl earrings catching the light as she turned toward me with a smile that didn't touch her eyes. "Oh, Loretta," she said, her voice floating across the room, sugary and sharp. "We saved your usual seat." I stepped forward, adjusting the pies in my hands. That's when I saw it taped to the back of my chair, scrawled in thick black marker, "Family Maid." For a second, the world tilted. I froze my fingers, tightening around the warm foil, the weight of the pies grounding me as heat rushed to my cheeks. Laughter erupted behind me. Kimberly, Celeste's sister, snorted into her napkin. Patricia avoided my gaze, offering a weak chuckle, as if that made her complicit. Wesley didn't move, didn't flinch. He just flicked his thumb across the screen, expression unreadable. Then my phone buzzed. 3 short vibrations in my coat pocket. I didn't need to check who it was. I already knew. And that's when something inside me began to shift. After Harold died, I told myself I'd give Wesley space to grieve in his own way. I didn't want to be the kind of mother who clung too tightly, so when he and Celeste suggested I stay with them, just for a while, I accepted. The house was large, the children still small, and I told myself I was helping, filling the gap, keeping busy. At first it felt like a blessing. Celeste thanked me for watching the twins when she returned to work, and Wesley would leave fresh coffee on the counter each morning with a quiet nod of appreciation. I cooked dinner. I folded laundry. I ran errands, sat through school pickups, scrubbed juice from the floor, and kept quiet. I reminded myself this was what family did, what mothers did, what widows should be grateful for a place to belong. But gratitude has a shelf life. Over time, the thank yous faded. The coffee stopped appearing. "We really count on you" became code for "we expect it." If I ever looked tired or hesitated to jump at a request, Celeste's voice would tighten. Well, if it's too much. It was never spoken outright, but I began to understand that I was no longer a guest. I was staff. Volunteer staff at that. Last Thanksgiving should have been the turning point. I had spent the morning roasting the turkey, arranging place cards, and refilling wine glasses. When dinner was ready, Celeste gave each of the children a seat assignment. I stood in the kitchen doorway, waiting for mine. She waved me off with a breezy, "Oh, Loretta, there's just not quite enough room this year. We thought you wouldn't mind eating at the counter." I smiled. I nodded. I sat alone while they passed stuffing and memories between them. I remember chewing through dry turkey while laughter floated from the other room. I told myself it was fine. It was temporary. That kindness required patience, but the person I kept thinking about that night wasn't Wesley or even Celeste. It was Theo. Theo, my daughter's boy. I raised him from the time he was 6 until he turned 18, while Miranda spiraled through rehab and relapses. We'd lost touch when he moved to Boston for college, but last spring he started calling again. Said he missed me. Said he wanted to visit more. I hadn't told him much, not yet. Just that I was tired sometimes. That night, sitting at the kitchen counter while everyone else clinked their glasses, I thought about calling him, but I didn't. Not then. Not yet. It was a Tuesday afternoon when Theo stopped by. I had just finished vacuuming the upstairs hallway when I heard the knock. He looked older than I remembered, taller too. but his eyes were the same dark, soft, full of unspoken questions. He brought flowers, a little bundle of mums wrapped in brown paper, and we sat at my small kitchen table sipping chamomile tea like no time had passed. We talked about his work. He was interning part-time at a legal nonprofit in Hartford, mostly housing rights and elder services. He said, stirring his tea, "Lots of bureaucracy, but sometimes we get to help someone who really needs it." Something about the way he said that unhooked something in me. Before I could stop myself, the words came out. Not all at once, just a trickle at first. A mention of last Thanksgiving, the name tag from the year before, the babysitting schedules, the errands, the laundry. How Celeste would ask me to re-wash towels because mine didn't smell fresh enough. How Wesley hadn't defended me in years. I tried to say it lightly, as if it were all just silly misunderstandings. But then I felt my voice break. I looked away, ashamed at the heat rising in my face. "It's not abuse," I muttered. "It's family. They're just a little thoughtless sometimes." Theo was quiet for a long moment. Then he set his cup down. "No, Grandma. That's emotional abuse. It may be polite. It may be dressed up as tradition, but it's still abuse." I shook my head, but I didn't speak. "I'm going to talk to Carla," he said. "She handles boundary-setting cases especially for women like you. It's not about suing anyone. It's about being heard." I nodded slowly, something heavy inside me starting to shift. The next day, he texted, "She wants to help. She's done this before with dignity, not drama." And that was when the idea stopped feeling foolish and started feeling like a way out. I carried the pies into the kitchen, the laughter from the dining room still lingering like smoke. The air smelled of rosemary butter and something else, sharper, colder. I set the foil-covered trays gently on the counter, smoothed the creases around the edges like it mattered. The house was too warm, the kind of heat that made you feel drowsy and exposed all at once. I moved to the window, pressed my palms to the marble ledge, and stared out at the trees. Bare limbs tangled against a slate-gray sky. Even the wind outside seemed quieter, as if it too was waiting. My phone buzzed again in my coat pocket. I pulled it out and read the message. "We're here." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The plan was already in motion. Turning back toward the counter, I saw the chair again through the doorway. The tag still hung from the backrest. "Family Maid," the letters loud and crooked. I walked toward it. My steps steady now. No one noticed. They were too busy passing rolls and pouring wine, talking over one another. I reached for the tag. My fingers hesitated for just a second before pulling it free. The paper was thicker than I expected, stiff between my hands. I folded it in half, then again, pressing each crease until the word disappeared. I laid it down beside the pies, smoothing it flat one last time. No speeches, no anger, no confrontation. Not yet. I walked back into the dining room and took my seat at the table. The conversation didn't pause, though. I felt eyes flick toward me, and then away. I unfolded my napkin and placed it in my lap. Celeste didn't say anything. Neither did Wesley. I picked up my water glass and took a small sip, letting the cold settle on my tongue. My hands were still resting quietly on either side of my plate, and then I heard it, the knock at the front door. The knock sounded like nothing at all soft. 2 gentle taps against the front door, but it sliced through the room like a blade. Conversations stuttered, laughter faltered. Celeste, mid-toast with her flute of sparkling cider, paused with her mouth slightly open. Wesley's eyes darted to me, then to the hallway. "Were you expecting someone?" he asked, trying to sound casual. But I saw the tension in his jaw. I placed my napkin down beside my plate, smoothing it out with care. "I'll get it," I said. "You don't have to." Wesley started already, half rising from his chair. But I was already on my feet, walking steadily toward the sound. The hallway felt long and quiet, the walls closing in just slightly with each step. At the door, I took one breath before opening it. Theo stood tall in a charcoal suit I hadn't seen before. His jaw was set. His eyes steady, though they softened the moment they met mine. Beside him was Carla, a slender woman in her 40s, sharp-eyed and calm. Her leather case tucked under one arm like an extension of her hand. "Hi, Grandma," Theo said. "Right on time," I replied. I stepped aside and let them in. By the time we reached the dining room, the entire table had fallen silent. Celeste was still holding her glass frozen in her performance. Kimberly looked confused. Patricia had lowered her fork, but kept her eyes down. Wesley had stood and was staring at Theo with cautious recognition. Celeste recovered first. "Theo, what a surprise," she said, her voice stretching itself into a brittle imitation of warmth. "You didn't mention bringing a guest." Theo gave a polite nod, then turned to the woman beside him. "This is Carla Salazar. She's here on behalf of my grandmother." Carla gave a respectful nod toward the room. "Good evening. I'm here to deliver a formal notice regarding misuse of personal labor, emotional distress, and the ongoing expectation of unpaid service." Celeste blinked. "Excuse me." Wesley stepped forward, his voice low. "What the hell is this?" I answered before Carla could. "It's not a lawsuit," I said calmly, holding Celeste's gaze. "It's a boundary." Carla opened her case and withdrew a single document. "This outlines what she has done for this household over the past decade," Carla said, placing the paper gently on the table, "and what she will no longer do." No one reached for it. The room held its breath. Carla stood with the ease of someone used to silence the kind that settles when something true is finally spoken aloud. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. "This document outlines 10 years of unrecognized labor performed by Mrs. Huxley," she said. "It includes meal preparation, daily childcare, school transportation, household cleaning, and holiday coordination. All done without compensation or acknowledgement, often under conditions that caused emotional strain." Celeste let out a nervous laugh, almost a scoff. "Are you serious right now? I'm not here to debate," Carla replied smoothly. "Only to make this boundary clear." Wesley stepped forward, his voice tense. "So what, you're suing us now?" I looked at him, then not as my son, but as the man who had watched this all unfold for years without once asking if I was okay. "No," I said, steady, "but I'm documenting what I won't accept anymore." I let the words settle. They weren't meant to shock. They were meant to free. Celeste finally put her glass down, the clink sharper than it needed to be. "It was a joke," she muttered, eyes flicking toward the folded sign, still resting beside the pies. "No," I replied, my voice quiet but certain. "It was a habit." She blinked. "I never laughed," I added. "Not the first time, not the 10th. But you kept doing it anyway." Carla placed a second page beside the first. "Going forward, Mrs. Huxley will not attend family events unless she is treated with basic dignity. That includes being given a seat at the table, not being assigned labor without consent, and being acknowledged as a guest, not as staff." Patricia shifted in her seat. No one else moved. Celeste crossed her arms. "You're tearing the family apart over this." I met her eyes. "No. I'm drawing a line so I can stop being torn up inside it." Theo stepped closer beside me, but I didn't need him to speak. I stood just fine on my own. Wesley looked at me, then truly looked, and I saw something flicker in his expression. Doubt, maybe, or discomfort. I didn't care. Not anymore. Carla gathered her case. Theo nodded once toward the doorway. I turned back toward the room one last time, not to wait for their reaction, but to release any need for it. And then I walked out. No one followed. The silence behind me was thick, heavy with the weight of things unsaid and long overdue. I heard the scrape of a fork being set down. A glass clinked too hard against a plate. But no footsteps. No apology. Theo held the door open, but I turned once more before stepping out. Marissa, my sister's girl, sat near the end of the table. Her brow was furrowed, lips parted, like she wanted to speak but wasn't sure how. Finally, in a voice barely above a whisper, she said, "I never realized." I offered her a small nod. That was enough. Not forgiveness, not even understanding, just awareness. That was a beginning. Celeste remained frozen at the head of the table, arms crossed, jaw tight. Wesley hovered behind her, his face pale and unreadable. He hadn't moved from his spot since the first page was laid down. His hands were in his pockets now, a gesture I recognized from childhood when he didn't know what to do and thought stillness might save him. It never had. "I hope this was worth it," Celeste said quietly, her voice laced with venom. "You've embarrassed us all." I didn't flinch. "I didn't create the embarrassment," I said. "I just stopped carrying it for you." And with that, I turned back toward the hallway. Theo walked beside me, Carla just behind. The air inside the house felt thinner now, like something heavy had been lifted. Or broken. I couldn't decide which. We stepped through the door and into the chill of late afternoon. The cold was sharp against my skin, but I welcomed it. It cleared the lingering warmth of performance and pretense. Behind us, the dining room lights still glowed. The table was set, the food untouched, steam fading into silence. We didn't look back. Not once. I woke to sunlight instead of a schedule. No early alarm. No pans to scrub. No list waiting on the kitchen counter. Just the soft warmth of the quilt pulled high around my shoulders, and the stillness of a room untouched by anyone but me. For the first time in years, I didn't move out of habit. I stretched slowly, breathed in the quiet, and let it settle. I padded to the kitchen, barefoot, the linoleum cool beneath my feet, and put on a kettle. While it boiled, I whisked together batter just enough for one. I cooked slowly, flipping the pancakes one at a time, letting the rhythm guide me. By the time the tea was steeped and the pancakes were stacked, I carried the plate and mug back to bed. I propped up my pillows and ate under the covers, syrup drizzled over each bite, warmth blooming in my chest that had nothing to do with food. Halfway through, my phone buzzed on the nightstand. A single message lit up the screen. "Theo, your piece is showing." I didn't reply right away. I just looked at it, letting the words settle into the quiet that filled my small cottage like a soft echo. Then I smiled. There was no performance here. No place setting with my name taped to the back. Just my own bed, my own dishes, and a stillness that felt like permission to simply exist. The pancakes were sweet, the tea still warm, and for the first time in a long while, nothing waited for me except the day itself. Later that afternoon, I sat at my kitchen table with the window open, just a crack, letting in the crisp November air. I watched the bare trees sway, and in that stillness, something finally settled inside me. For years, I'd mistaken guilt for loyalty. I thought enduring was love, that if I gave enough, stayed silent long enough, proved myself useful enough, someone would say, "We see you. We're grateful." But gratitude doesn't bloom in silence, and love, the kind that sustains, doesn't require erasure. I had been loyal, yes, but not to people. I'd been loyal to the belief that being needed meant I was valued, that if I kept giving one day, they'd stop taking. I see now how flawed that was. They didn't ask for my sacrifice. They simply accepted it until it became expected. Normal, invisible. The next morning, I drove into town and parked outside the old brick building with chipped paint and a sign that read, Meadow Hill Community Center. Inside, it smelled of coffee and old paper. A woman with short gray curls and reading glasses smiled from behind the front desk. I asked about volunteer programs, specifically anything related to women my age, those who might be feeling unseen, unheard, too polite to say what they needed. The woman handed me a clipboard. "We're always glad for people who understand," she said. I filled in my name, and something about writing it on that line in my own handwriting felt like the start of something new. Not a role inherited or assigned, but one I chose. When I got home, the folded name tag still sat in the drawer beside my sink. I picked it up, then placed it in the trash without ceremony. Then I opened the window a little wider. The following Thanksgiving, my house smelled of roasted garlic and rosemary. The table was smaller now, just 6 seats, but each one had been set with care. Theo brought fresh rolls and a bottle of cider. Carla arrived with a cranberry tart and 2 place cards she'd made by hand. Beside her sat Rosa, a soft-spoken woman from the center who had once been too afraid to speak in meetings and now led them. There was no script, no head of the table. Just laughter, soft music, second helpings and stories shared between bites. I had baked a pecan pie, same as always, but this time I didn't serve it standing in the kitchen or refill anyone's glass without being asked. I passed the dishes when they were passed to me. I sat. I ate. I was part of it. Midway through the meal, Theo stood and raised his glass. He didn't make a speech, just reached across the table and unfolded a piece of paper he'd tucked beneath his plate. He slid it toward me. The handwriting was familiar, his careful and slanted. To the woman who taught us strength without shouting. My throat tightened. I didn't speak. I just nodded and folded the paper gently this time, not to hide it, but to keep it. The conversation continued. Dishes were cleared. The tart was served. No one rushed, and no one left without hugging me goodbye. After the last door closed and the house fell quiet again, I stood alone in my kitchen, hands resting on the counter. The sink was empty. The name tag was long gone. I turned off the light and whispered it out loud, not for anyone else, just for myself. They called me the family maid. This year, I served justice, cold with a side of dignity.